I've said it before and I'll say it again. Visualization is a great way to build a guitar so that you avoid making mistakes that could derail your project. And I'm going to demonstrate that in this video. What I'm going to be talking about specifically is how I plan to wire up all the controls for my hollow body guitar build, because the process for doing this is very different than the process I use for installing the electronics in the solid body guitar. Because as you'll remember, the solid body guitar has a control cavity in the back, which allows easy access for installing the electronics. But I'm following the traditional process for installing the electronics in this guitar. And that means I have to follow a very specific order of steps in order to do this correctly. If I don't, I end up having to redo everything. Now, it's not going to be a disaster, but it does slow down the process. And when you're making videos about what you're doing, if you're doing it wrong, you look like a fool. So in this case, what I had to do was I had to think about how I'm going to be installing the electronics, including the pickups, and then what order I'm going to do this. Because what I have to do to install the electronics is I have to feed each component through the F-hole and then navigate it to its appropriate mounting hole in order to install it. Well, as I was visualizing this process, it occurred to me that the best way to do it is to solder up all the electronics. And what I have here are 4 potentiometers. And these are mini pots because the full-size pots won't fit through this F-hole. So I have to use the mini pot in order to easily install them. I also have my 1/4-inch output jack, and this is just a standard Switchcraft mono jack. And then I have a Switchcraft 3-way toggle switch. So that is all the electronics. And everything is going to be fed through and into its appropriate mounting hole. What that means is I need to solder all the electronics together outside of the guitar and then feed them one at a time into their appropriate location. But what that also means is I have to think about how I'm going to install the pickups, because the pickups obviously are going to be wired to the pots as well as the switch. So if I were to install all the electronics first and then install the pickups, I'd run into a little bit of a problem, because then I'd have to remove all the electronics in order to solder the pickup wires to the appropriate locations on the back of the pots as well as the switch. That means what I really need to do is install the pickups first before I install the electronics. So I'll have to feed the wire down into the body, and then I'm going to install and screw down the pickups into their appropriate pickup holes, pickup pockets. Then I would have to use this little handy, this is a surgical tool. One time I had a minor in-office surgical procedure or actually it was at the emergency room. And after I was done, they said, "Hey, do you want these little clamps and the tweezers, because they get thrown away anyways. They're yours, you paid for them because you had the surgery." And I said, "Yeah, I'll take it." And as it turns out, they've been really useful. So I can use them to feed the electronics, the wiring, up through the F-hole. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this video, you can show your support by clicking the thumbs up button down below. It's free to do. You can also click the subscribe button, which is also free. And when you do that, you can click the bell for notifications. That way you'll never miss any future content. But if you want to take your support to the next level, you can click the thanks button and leave a tip in the amount that you think is fair. Or you can click the join button or the subscribe plus button and become a member of my channel. And as a member, you're going to be able to enjoy videos just like the one you're watching, but with much more detail, and best of all, no ads. Now let's get back to the video. Then what I can do is solder the leads to the appropriate locations on the pots and the switch. Then I can install those components into the right position. So this is just a great example of how visualizing is going to save me a lot of time as I'm building this guitar. Another example of it is the ground wire for the bridge, because I like to ground the bridge. That way the strings are grounded, and that reduces a lot of noise because the strings act like an antenna for 60 cycle hums. So what I need to do is I've actually, these are the holes that are drilled for the two-pneumatic bridge posts. And what I've done is I've drilled a hole. There's a block under here that supports the bridge, and I've drilled a hole through that block down into where the pickups are. And I can just simply run my ground wire down into that pocket. And then what happens is the strands of wire will be captured basically between the wall of the hole and the bridge mount itself. So they will be compressed down in there, and that puts those strands of wire in contact with that bridge mount. Then I just simply would feed the ground wire down into the body where I can access it through the F-hole, and then I would pull it up and solder the end to the back of one of the grounded pots. That way my grounding is extended from the bridge mount up to the bridge and into the strings. But this has to be done before I install the pickups, and obviously before I install the electronics. So through visualizing this process before I actually do it, I've come up with the correct order of steps in order to install the electronics. The first is to install this ground wire for the bridge. The second is to install and mount the pickups and then run that wiring up and out of the F-hole. The third is to solder all the electronics together. The fourth is to solder the pickups and the ground wire to the back of one of the pots. And then the fifth step is to feed each of the components into the F-hole and into its appropriate mounting hole on the guitar. So now that I have that all figured out, I can proceed with the process. And that's what I'm going to be doing in the next episode in this series. I will be installing all these electronic components, and at that stage, a lot of the assembly process will have be complete, and then I can start to install the bridge, the tuners, and then string up the guitar, and then start looking at getting frets leveled and that sort of thing. So I hope that you found this video to be useful and informative, especially on the topic of visualizing the processes. And really, visualization is something that's not only useful in building guitars, it's useful in just about anything that you do where you have a number of steps that need to be completed in order to finish whatever it is you're trying to do. Visualizing those processes will help you avoid those uh-oh moments when you realize I did it backwards or I did it in the wrong order. So at any rate, I hope you found the video to be useful. If so, give it a thumbs up. That's what helps this channel, and it's free to do. And of course, you can do all the other things I mentioned in the video, and that will take your support to the next level so that you can learn and watch what I'm doing, but get much more information as a member of my channel. At any rate, until the next episode, as always, take care, stay safe, and I hope you'll be back for more of these guitar building videos.